In this video, I'm going to run through the techniques used in the Kraemer Yarns Lost in a Dream hooded cape. You can see it on the mannequin right behind me. This is a pattern distributed by Kraemer Yarns, designed by Vanessa Ewing, and it's knit in DK weight yarn. And this is this pattern that I bought to knit myself. I subscribed to the Kraemer newsletter. I saw this design in their newsletter, and I bought all the yarn to knit it for myself, and I was about halfway through it. And I contacted Kraemer and said, we should do a tutorial on this. I think other people are going to want to make this cape. I love it. It's made with this beautiful Perfection DK yarn. And this yarn is a merino acrylic blend. It feels totally like merino. It doesn't have any acrylic feel to it all, but it's completely machine washable and dryable. And my cape has been machine washed and dried, and it looks great. It's really easy to care for, and it feels very good. There are like 70 different colors, and it is a great value. This yarn is really inexpensive. I don't know how they did it, but this is one of my very favorite new yarns. We actually used this yarn in the Shadow Checkerboard Baby Blanket tutorial that I released recently. I'll give you a link in the video description field below if you want to see that pattern from Kraemer and tutorial. Anyway, this is flattering for all body types. As you can see, it's made with this yarn that feels really good and is nice to knit with. And I would say that it is somewhere between advanced beginner and intermediate level. If you are really confident with kind of knitting basics, knitting, purling, increasing, decreasing. I'm going to run through everything else with you, like chart reading and making a buttonhole, picking up and knitting stitches. We're going to do all that here. And if you're an intermediate knitter, this should not be a problem. This should be a breeze for you. You can click the little I to be whisked away to my website, where I will have a link to the pattern and to the yarn and to anything else that I think of that I'll put in there. I'll also have a link to my website in the video description field below if you're on mobile. And so get your pattern and get your yarn ordered. I have a few different colors here that I can show you of the Perfection DK yarn. And next up, we will get started with chart reading. If you have your pattern and your yarn ordered, we are ready to get started on this pattern. We're going to look at chart reading first. That's the first thing we're going to talk about. And the basics of chart reading are the same whether you're working a stitch pattern like this one or you're working a color pattern like for Fair Isle or something. The basics for chart reading is the same across patterns. It's not something I can say very often because designers can do whatever they want, but we all kind of stick with the same set of rules for chart reading. So working on this and learning more about chart reading will help you in a lot of patterns in the future. Before we do that, I want to show you a close-up of this stitch pattern. So let's go ahead and take a look. This is a little sample of the cape in this orange color. The color is called Tiger. And I don't always get excited about orange, but gosh, the stitch looks great in this. Isn't this pretty? And it's easy to see it on camera. That's why I wanted to show you that one first. And here it is in this color called Winter Lake, kind of a bluish gray. So pretty. This one has not been blocked. This one I steamed out a little bit to flatten it out. This one is still just the way it looks coming off the needles. It's a beautiful stitch. It looks great, and you can see kind of these spines. That's where the increases happen, so it all blends together and looks really good, maintaining the pattern while you increase. Alrighty, let's take a look at the chart. And here I'm showing you the hood chart, and the hood chart is exactly the same. The stitches is exactly the same as the cape. I'm just using the hood chart because it's bigger, it's easier to see, and it's just kind of a little bite of the chart that is easier to absorb. Here you see that there's row 1. As with most charts, we're going to start here at the bottom, and because this is knit flat, it's open in the front. It's a flat knit piece that you knit on the right side and then the wrong side and the right side and the wrong side. You read the chart this way. All the right side rows are from right to left and the wrong side rows are from left to right. And this is written really easy because the wrong side rows are all listed. I mean, the odd numbered rows are all listed on this side and the even numbered rows are all listed on this side, so it's easy to see. So row 1, you read the chart this way. Row 2, you read the chart this way, and you just keep going back and forth like this. Okay, so First up on row 1, we have 4 empty squares, 1 dot, and then 4 empty squares. If you look at the empty square and the key, on the right side it is knit, and the dot on the right side it is purl. This is just a knit purl combination here. So it's knit 4, purl 1, knit 4. And we're going to take a look at how this all fits, of course, into the poncho, but right now we're just talking about the chart. And then working on the wrong side, we have 3 empty boxes, and you look up here, empty boxes on the wrong side are purl. So you purl 3. These are knit on the wrong side, knit 3, purl 3. And charts are written this way, where you're flipping the knits and purls on the right side and the wrong side, just so that when you look at it, when you look at the chart, you can see that it makes a pattern that looks just like this, right? You can see how one looks like the other. If charts were written differently, it would be very visually confusing. So 4 knit stitches, 1 purl, 4 knit, and on the next row it's 3 purl stitches, 3 knit stitches, 3 purl stitches. And it's a little bit to juggle in your mind until you get the hang of it. Once you get the hang of it, and you'll be working the stitch pattern enough, it becomes kind of second nature. And it's great practice for chart reading. Okay, let's actually take a look at how this is set up. First of all, keep in your mind that this is 9 stitches right here. Okay, this first row, because this is how it's set up. And this is all very clear in your pattern. I just want to show you how it is. You cast on 111 stitches, and the first 5 stitches are a garter stitch border, so every row is knit. And then you place a marker and then have 1 stitch and another marker is placed. And this is a row that is stockinette. It's knit on the right side, purled on the wrong side, and that's where we get the spines, where the increases are done. And then the 9 stitches between those 2 markers, it's more than that now because I've done some increasing, but the next 9 stitches of your cast on are the 9 stitches that you see here in the chart pattern. And then there's 1 stitch that's a spine, another 9 stitches, 1 stitch that's the spine, on and on until you get to the end, and it's another 5-stitch garter border, right? So that little bit of the chart we just read is repeated between these markers multiple times over and over again. And you just always remember the single stitch between the close markers, those are always knit. Okay, that's the basic setup. Like I said, it's really clear in the pattern, but it's just the same thing over and over again, and you really get into the swing of it. Like you end up looking at your pattern a lot over the first repeat, but then you kind of have it over the next ones, and then you turn the work, you look at your chart, the same thing where you really have to focus and concentrate on the first repeat. But then the more comfortable you get with the chart reading, the more you're able to see what's coming up next. You kind of, it's just these few rows that are repeated. You kind of know what's coming up next. It's great practice. It's great practice, and it's fun knitting, I think. Okay, so let's talk about tension on these. We're going to work from this Winter Lake color here, and we're going to talk about knit and purl tension. And my sample is actually smaller than the whole poncho, but it still works the same even though I have fewer repeats. So right up front we have these 5 garter stitch, the garter stitch border. They are always knit. I put my needle in and pull it through and off, and then I make sure I give that stitch a tug so that I have a nice garter stitch border, because this is the front of our sweater. This is the opening of the sweater, right? Or the cape, I suppose. Kind of working too close to the mat here. So knit those, slip the marker on the right side. You always knit that stitch between the markers, and then I'm following, I think I'm on the correct row. Yeah, I'm actually following what is row 17 here. So I knit 2, purl, knit, purl, and then knit 5, and then purl, knit, purl. And this is where I want to talk about tension again. I'm going to yarn forward to purl, yarn back, knit, yarn forward to purl. Make sure that you're giving the yarn a tug between these knits and purls. I just purled one, yarn back, give that yarn a tug to pick up the slack, and knit one. Just make sure your tension is good between the knit and purl stitches. We'll do it again here. Okay, I'm up the purl stitch, yarn forward to purl, and when you yarn back to do the knit stitch, give that yarn a tug. And you see, I picked up a lot of slack there when I did that. Tug. Anyway, so the point is that between your knit and purl stitches, make sure that the yarn is not slack so that you end up with a fabric without any holes in it and that looks smooth and consistent all the way through. Anyway, if you do make, I'm thinking now though, if you do make a few tension mistakes over the whole of the whole poncho, I don't think it's going to make a whole lot of difference, especially after it's machine washed and dried. Okay, so we can set that aside. The next thing I want to demonstrate is the make one right and left stitches. And you see here in the pattern, like on row 3 and 7 and 11 of the hood, we have make one right and then make one left in those same rows because they're mirrored. And it's not on the hood, but on the cape itself. This is the chart for the cape. We have make one purlwise right leaning and make one purlwise left leaning. We're going to talk about those in a minute. First, I want to demonstrate make one right and left. And I have this little sample, and it was totally unnecessary for me to do stockinette and reverse stockinette. I just thought it would look cool. So I'm just going to knit some stitches to get myself to a place where I can show you this. For make one right, we have the bar between the two stitches. I'm kind of pulling it apart. You see this bar. I always use the tip of my right needle to pick it up and put it on the right needle, or the left needle. So I'm going to pick it up and put it on the left needle, putting the left needle in from back to front. I'll do that again, from back to front. And for a right leaning make one, you want to knit through the front loop of that stitch, like this. Okay, we'll do that again. Pick this up, left needle in back to front, and knit through the front loop of that stitch. And I always create some slack with my first finger to make that happen. There we go. And for left leaning, I pick that up and put the left needle in from front to back. And now we want to knit this through the back loop. And to do that, to get your needle in there easily, I always put it in the front and roll it over. Pick that up, put the left needle in front to back. You can just put your needle straight in there. It's kind of, I mean, I just did it, it's not that hard, but I always put it in and roll it over to get it in there easily. Okay, we're going to do some purl stitches now. And actually my yarn is tangling up. Okay. For make one purlwise, the pattern specifies make one purlwise left leaning and right leaning. I'm going to tell you the way that these appear in the pattern, it doesn't matter if you do make one purlwise left leaning or right leaning. It just matters that you do make one purlwise. So first I'm going to show you right leaning. You pick up the bar just like you did for the make one knit side. I'm going to put my needle in from back to front. This is a right leaning. Pull the yarn forward and purl that stitch through the front. That is the easiest way to do a make one purlwise, and it's actually what I recommend to do in this whole pattern, because make one purlwise left leaning is harder. But I'm going to show you this one again that you can, I didn't do any left leaning. I did them all this way. Pull up the bar between the two stitches, put your needle in from back to front, make sure your working yarn is in front so you can purl, and just get your needle in there and purl it. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to do the other way because I'm a knitting teacher and I will show you. Pull that up, the bar between the two stitches, put the needle in from front to back. Make sure your working yarn's in front. Now we want to knit this stitch through the back loop. And to do that, you have to get the needle in like so. See? I'll do that again. Pull this up, put the needle in from front to back, the left needle. Make sure your working yarn's in front. And we want to knit through the back loop, which means putting our needle in, let me do this, from this side, this way. It's not easy. It really slows down your knitting. So it's kind of good that it doesn't matter which way you do it. Okay, those are all the make one stitches that appear in the pattern. And I can actually give you links to a short technique video of just the make one stitches if you want to have access to that while you're knitting this. And the next thing I want to show you, these are all the techniques back to back, because most of this is just going to be you working the chart over and over and over. And so I want to show you the different little things that you'll encounter every now and then while you're working on it. Okay, this is a sample that I worked up, and this color is called Puddle. Okay, this color is called Puddle, and this is a sample where I'm going to demonstrate the buttonhole, because we have 3 buttons down the front of the poncho, and this is the right front of the cape. Okay, this is the cast on here, and this is the right front. And here is the first buttonhole right here. And the pattern says, you know, as you're working along the pattern, you see those words that you sometimes see in patterns. At the same time, also do this thing. This is the thing they want you to do at the same time. After you've worked an inch in, you'll work the first buttonhole, and then the next 2 buttonholes appear 3 inches apart from each other thereon. So my first buttonhole appeared 1, 2, 3, 4 after 4 garter stitch ridges. And then there's 11 ridges between the second and the third and the third and the fourth. That's how it worked out for me. If 3 inches is different for you, that's fine. Or you can space them differently if you like. But it was 4 ridges for me here, 11, and then 11. So I am going to show you how to work the buttonhole. If you've never done one before, they're really easy. And it's nice how buttonholes just happen so easily in knitting. I am just going to knit. I'm not going to do the chart. I'm just going to get us there, because the buttonhole appears at the end of the row, the end of the right side row, for it to appear on the right hand side of the cape. You're going to get all the way up to the garter stitch border. Okay, we're up here to the garter stitch border. And what you're going to do is, first thing, knit 2 together, yarn over, so pull the yarn forward and over the needle, and then knit 3 to the end. And then when you turn the work to work the other side, you'll knit the stitches because it's your garter stitch border. You'll run into the yarn over, just knit it like a normal stitch. And let me get past these markers. When you're done, you will have a hole in the work that is just the right size for a button. How easy was that? Buttons are really easy to work in knitting, and it looks really good in this garter stitch border. Oh, we just went through so many techniques. Okay, those are all of the techniques you're going to run into while you're working the body of the cape. We start here at the neck and we knit down, and then you're going to put a garter stitch border at the bottom. And then when you're finished with that, we're going to pick up stitches and knit the hood. And that's what we're going to cover in the next section. Once you finish the whole cape, then we're ready to do the hood. And I'll tell you, the hood goes a lot faster than the cape. You keep increasing on the cape and your rows keep getting longer and you're making this long, luxurious thing. The hood is just a little thing compared to that. So you're almost there. So the first thing we're going to cover is picking up and knitting the stitches for the hood. So let's go ahead and take a look. This is actually my hood sample piece, but we're going to use this piece for a lot of different things right now, only because it's easier to see than this sample piece in the darker yarn. So this is my cast on, and just like your cape, you'll have your cast on like this. And when you take a close look at the cast on, you'll see that it's made up of all of these V's, right? I'm going to want to turn it around this way. All of these V's. And that's what we're going to put our needle in when we pick up and knit stitches. So we cast on 111 stitches for the neckline. We are going to pick up 111 stitches. And to do this, I am, of course, going to do it in an obnoxiously different color so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to use a DPN because it's short. You're going to want to use circular needles for this, or the needles that you were using for your cape. So I'm going to put my needle under the first V, take my yarn, and leaving myself like a 6-inch tail, just wrap that back needle. It's not that hard. Wrap that back needle and then pull it through to the front. And that's the first stitch. And then from here on, you just follow each V across. Put your needle into the next V, drop the tail end, wrap the needle, pull it through. And a lot of times when you're picking up and knitting stitches, you're keeping careful count because you're picking up along the side of the work where it's not one for one. But this time it's really easy. You're just picking up one stitch for every cast on stitch. And that will give us the live stitches that we need to start knitting the hood. Do that all the way across the cast on edge. And so the next thing I want to show you is, you're just going to follow the chart like you did before. Where am I on my list here? I know what I want to show you. Okay. Of course I know what I want to show you. I don't know why I made that announcement. You're going to be knitting along with your hood pattern, and you'll get to row 17 and then repeat rows 12 to 17 over and over again until you get to the length mentioned in the pattern. And then you're going to start doing some shaping. And what's going to happen is you're going to work up to what is the center line of the hood, and you're going to decrease on either side of this stockinette spine, right? You're going to decrease just like SSK and knit two together. And the pattern's really clear about how to do this. And you're going to do this for a few rows. So you're going to have fewer stitches in these two sections, right? Because you have this whole thing to work, but you'll have fewer stitches. So you'll only work up to, say this stitch. And then when you start the next section, you will actually start a few stitches in and work that way. But by the time you get to this section of the hood, you're so familiar with this stitch pattern. It's not difficult to, stop and start the chart in a couple of different spaces because you have fewer stitches here in the center. And then that's going to create some shaping on the back of the hood so that you don't end up, with like an elf hat. And then the last part of the shaping for the hood actually involves binding off some stitches and working the two halves of the hood separately. And if you have an interchangeable needle set, this is a good time to put that to use. And that's what I'm going to demonstrate for you now. Let me get the chart out of the way. If you have an interchangeable needle set, it will come with, extra cords and stoppers. So the first thing we're going to do, well, let me tell you what I'm doing first. I'm going to knit across to the center and then leave the rest of these stitches on a stitch holder essentially, but I'm going to use interchangeable needle cord as a stitch holder. The first thing I'm going to do is get this needle. I want this needle off so I can put a stopper on here because this is going to be my stitch holder. I'm planning ahead here for this next row I'm about to knit. And then I'm going to attach this needle to this extra little bit of cord. And you can use a 16-inch cord or a 24-inch cord. It's not very many stitches. Okay, so I have all my work, my needle, and the other end is a stopper, and then I have an extra needle with a stopper, And this is all going to work out great in just a minute here. I'm going to knit across to, or work the pattern across to the center. And you'll have to be patient with me here. It's worth it because I want to make sure that you see how this goes. If you aren't getting maximum use out of your hold on, I cannot read a chart. Obviously I cannot read a chart, and there we go. If you're not getting maximum use out of your interchangeable needle set, this will help you. Okay. I'm reading a chart and counting and trying to talk. This is, there's no way I can do this effectively. I already know this. Okay, I'm just about up to the center here. Okay, I followed the pattern and I knit up to the center where I'm going to start doing some binding off. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull my needles so that nothing's going to fall off while I do this next bit. And I need this needle off. I'm going to swap one needle and one end cap, end stopper thing. And I'll show you how this all ends up when I'm done. But it saves you from sliding stitches around. You know, if you put stitches on scrap yarn, that's great and it's really effective. But if all you have to do is attach a needle and not transfer those stitches back to a needle, you're kind of ahead of the game. Whoops, do you know what I did? I have I have a short circular needle, but long needles. That's not going to be great. I should have grabbed a longer cord. Anyway, it's all right. So now these stitches are held on essentially a stitch holder now, which is a circular needle cord. And these stitches are live with 2 needles attached, ready to work a wrong side row. And the wrong side row, we're going to start with bound off stitches. You know, and actually I'm not sure if those stitches are bound off. Okay, it doesn't specify, but the stitches are bound off on a wrong side row, but they're going to be absorbed in a seam. So it doesn't matter if you bind off knitwise or purlwise. But the first thing you're going to do is to bind off 3 stitches at the back center of the hood. And that's what this looks like. You're going to knit 2, and this is how you count bind off stitches in the middle of your work like this. When you pull one stitch over the other, you count 1. When you pull one stitch over the other, that's 2, that's 3. And the reason I wanted to specify this and make a point of it is because you did have to knit 2 stitches to start this, but those 2 stitches that are knit aren't counted. It's the actual bind off process that is counted, right? Okay, let me just get to the other end of this so I can demonstrate one more thing. I am not following the chart. I'm not following the chart so I can keep you company while you watch me purl. You see how I'm pulling the yarn back like this after I slip a marker? Just to make sure there's no tension, no slack in the yarn from where the marker is. Just keeps things tidy, right? Okay, I'm going to knit the garter stitch border. Okay. So that was just one bind off that I showed you. You're actually going to bind off more stitches at the beginning of the next few rows to really shape the back of this. And you'll do the same thing. You'll work the same thing here on this other side. And then when all that is done, you're ready to Kitchener stitch the top of the hood together. So the hood, of course, this is not finished, but the hood comes together like this being like the forehead area, and this being, the back, the crown of the head area, and it's all attached to the sweater already because we picked up and knit these stitches to do this. So our interchangeable needles are going to come in handy again here because I want this needle off. You'll see my setup here. And this stopper off. Swap those two. Put the stopper on here. Whoops, no, I just did it backwards. And the needle on here. And I'll be sure to show you exactly what my setup is. I know it's not very clear right now. Put the key in and tighten that up. Okay. So now I have it set up with the stoppers here at the fold and the two needles here at the garter stitch border, right? And everything is naturally tangled up more than will allow me just to grab a little bit of yarn. Okay. So here we are. This is our setup now. Two stoppers over here, two needles over here, and the garter stitch border here. Right? This is how we do the Kitchener stitch. First thing, excuse me, I did not have a tapestry needle ready for this. We're going to leave a bit of a tail, and I always leave, if you leave like 20 inches, it's going to be far more than you need, but I always like to make sure I have enough. Line up your stitches and your needles. And the first thing we're going to do is kind of a couple of setup stitches for this. So on the front needle, you're going to go in as if to purl on that stitch, pull it through and leave it. And on the back needle, am I doing this the right way? Yes. You're going to go in as if to knit and leave it. Now we're going to start the sequence for Kitchener stitch. And the Kitchener stitch is going to graft together the two halves of the hood without a seam on the inside. Kitchener stitch is magic. So the first thing we do is go in as if to knit on the front stitch, knit, take that stitch off, and then also on the front needle, purl, jump over to the back needle, go in as if to purl, off, and then as if to knit on the next stitch, and then tighten everything up. So this is the sequence. Front needle, knit, off, purl, back needle, purl, off, knit. Front needle, knit, off, purl, back needle, purl, off, knit. So knit, off, purl, purl, off, knit. And if you've never done this before, you're going to wish you had an extra set of hands because everything just feels like it's trying to fall off the needles and be terrible, but you do get the hang of it. Knit, off, purl, purl, off, knit. And after you finish the sequence, you can give it a tug. Purl, off, knit. And give it a tug. And let's take a look at what we have. This is just the garter stitch border. You can see how great that seam looks. And I can actually tighten it up a little bit more if I can find my yarn. That's just the border and it looks so good. And it'll continue to look good all the way across. Okay, it's funny because we did so much knitting with the whole cape, and then a lot of the techniques all came together when we were working on the hood. That's where a lot of everything, it's the smallest piece, but there's still like the most techniques used. Anyway, that is the Lost in the Dream cape from Kraemer Yarns. I hope you enjoy knitting it. I totally loved knitting mine, and it's still cold enough here in Austin for me to wear it. I couldn't wear it until after the tutorial. Now I can wear it. I hope you have fun knitting it. Good luck.